Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Psychology of Business podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brandon Griffin, and joining me in my virtual studio today is Chuck Salvo. How are you doing today, Chuck?
I'm doing wonderful, Brandon. Thanks for having me.
So in today's episode, we are going to talk about Chuck's background, and we are going to talk about the new book that he has just published. Is it released, or is it still waiting
It
to come
is
out?
released. It's on Amazon already. Are they ready to read?
All right, so the book is called RAVE, How to Respect and Value Everyone, A Journey of Life Lessons from Disney and Beyond. So before we actually dig into what RAVE is, I thought it would be a good idea to talk about who you are and just some main highlights of your life leading up to your work at Disney and the writing of this book.
Well, my greatest highlights, Brandon. I have a daughter, beautiful wife, and then two beautiful grandkids. My grandson is special needs. He has autism. And this book was really a legacy journey for me for them. I was really in my work. I am a chief happiness architect. I was 15 years with Disney and the Disney Institute. I had a career in adult education, entertainment, and resorts and hotels, and I'm a trained chef. However, over the last 15 years, prior to starting my own company about 4 years ago, called Salvo Innovative Solutions, I really was focused in on adult education and teaching people how to build a superior work culture. And when I was out doing this over all these years during my career, especially the last probably decade, and even worse as COVID came, I just really started noticing that people weren't talking to each other. They're afraid to talk to each other. And then when COVID came and the vibrant discussion that was happening around the country, people really became afraid to even talk to one another because they were afraid of being offending or hurting their feelings, or worse, the flip side, they belong to just their clan or their herd, and they just didn't want to associate or listen into a versatile set of ideas. So the book came because one of my clients said, Chuck, we have a group of leaders that are of multiple different cultures, 5 or different cultures or so, and demographics and all sorts of different variety and versatility within the organization, which should be great. She said, but they're about to kill each other. And we want you to develop a workshop of how to get them to get along. And my first thought process, because this was during right after COVID happened, so it was a very volatile time. I was like, no, I don't want to touch that. But then I started thinking, well, maybe based on my background, I could actually help human beings kind of work together. And then circling back to my grandkids, and that is a project that I think could better them and be in a small way. Maybe I could may help make a better world for my grandkids and give them a legacy of respecting and valuing everyone also.
I think that's great. I definitely think that's true. It felt like coming out of COVID, things were ultra charged with people's health, ultra charged politically. There was a lot of people didn't know which way was up, which way was down, what was appropriate, what was not appropriate. So I'm sure that was hard diving into that situation. But coming out of it, is this what led to RAVE? Working through all these ideas and kind of this post-pandemic world. Is that what ended up happening? What was the book RAVE?
Yeah, exactly. So as I started exploring this and diving into it, two things I started thinking about. One of my inspirations was some books from my early business days that were short, concise. A lot of these books on looking at personality types and teaching people how to really gain respect for one another can be really deep and really academic. So my approach when I'm on stage or when I'm in workshops, I tell people all the time, this is very shallow. There's these great books out there, and you probably, Brandon, have you ever taken any personality tests like Myers-Briggs or
Mm-hmm.
DISC or any of Gallup or any of those? They're all wonderful. Don't get me wrong. In fact, in the book, I have a chart that actually allows you to if you took one of those, you could match it against others. So so you can see how they all mesh together. But my book is much more focused on an easy approach, a simple
Hmm.
approach that I don't have to be a psychology. You're all about the psychology of business. Sometimes we overcomplicate things. My role here was to try to simplify relationships. And how do I go back? How do we go back to the basics of even just identifying personality types of people and respecting those personality types, and challenging people to start basic conversations once again.
Well, I think that'd be great. A book like that, because I have books by Adam Grant, and he's great. He's a phenomenal organizational psychologist, but he's an academic. His books have, the academic background, but having something from a more practical standpoint of real life experience is definitely needed. So before we do that, do you want to talk about what you did at Disney? Because Disney's one of the most exciting companies out there. Everyone has good experiences either going to the parks or watching the movies, or just hearing Disney. I know growing up, I went to the Disneyland. I'm from the West, and also watched the movies. But now you're a chief happiness architect. So do you want to tell us what you actually did at Disney?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, at Disney, I worked for 15 years with an organization within Disney called the Disney Institute. So the Disney Institute was formed when people would come to Disney, just like you just said, Brandon. Like Disney is so great at this or so great at that, and businesses would come to us and say, "Hey, can you teach us how to be that way?" And we'd say, "Sure, we could teach you how to treat your customers great, because that's what they were looking for." And we'd say, "But first, you need to treat your employees well." And they'd say, "No, no, no, we don't want that. We just want to treat our customers." We say, "No, you don't understand. It's all connected." So the Disney Institute was formed to help companies outbound teach organizations how to do that, and they still exist today and still do wonderful seminars. But Disney, even as you've read over the years, has had struggle within culture, just like a lot of corporations. And my hope is, because they are such a great company, they get back to their core beliefs. But we taught some very clean and clear guidelines and frameworks on how to develop service culture structures, or human respect structures that would allow people to have, and other organizations to have, a culture like Disney. So 15 years I did that with the Disney Institute. Traveled the world, helping all sorts of companies. So I was very, very blessed to be able to go around and teach that, but also learn so much about other companies. I mean, any company you could type of that you could think of, Brandon. I mean, we're talking like anything from airlines to hospitals to food and beverage to hotels to, I mean, engineers. I mean, it's amazing that this process that they do works with everybody. But that's what I had the joy of doing for 15 years before I started my own company.
So as you're talking at the end there, I think it's so interesting how oftentimes we can think about industries and specific job functions and how it can seem so siloed. But at the end of the day, if we take a step back, everyone goes to work from 9 to 5. Your time may be a little bit different. You may be working remotely, but you're going to have interactions with coworkers. You're going to have interactions with customers, and maybe things aren't as different as we thought. So everyone maybe can follow a simple playbook like RAVE, and are going to have positive outcomes. So do you want to dive
Yeah.
into what RAVE is? Let's dive into the meat of the book.
Well, thanks, Brandon. Yeah, I mean, just to take one step back again, the work I did at Disney was now kind of beyond foundational. Rave is foundational. As people started looking at telephones and viewing texting, I mean, how many times, Brandon, did you do it yourself? Did you ever like text somebody next door to you, or in the
Oh
same
yeah.
room, or at the same
Oh
table?
yeah. Yeah.
Right? So, we've lost that art. In fact, I just did an article today about that we've lost that art of people really trying to engage face to face because they're scared to. And again, for all the reasons we just mentioned, in the last few moments, some of them are just scared to. So rave goes to be very, very foundational, and it first starts with the golden rule. I mean, we've all been taught that, treat others as you want to be treated. I talk about emotional connection, about how do you connect emotionally with somebody, and to do that, you need to identify what your what their personality type is. But first, you need to understand what your personality type is, and then in the book, I talk about then how to start those conversations, and then how to compromise and have good back and forth discussion. I also talk about that, we don't need to dive into these deep philosophical thought right now either. We're not going to start conversations with what were we taught as children? Don't talk about war, don't talk about money, don't talk about politics, that sort of stuff. So that's good wisdom. You don't start a conversation that way. Maybe as you build a relationship, you could then have some good conversations on that. But again, still having those conversations, understanding that it's okay that you don't agree. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, not only is it okay, it's wonderful because you're going to learn something, you know? And so the book just kind of takes you down a path and a journey of how to first identify a personality, and then how to use that and how to use understanding others' personalities. And again, a very shallow way, not going too in depth. Just trying to get an idea. And Brandon, you're probably wondering, like, if I guess your personality, I mean, you definitely are partly expressive, but in your world of what you do, you probably have a very high analytic. Would that be true or not true?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. So now, by knowing that, I get to understand that you probably want, it's probably why you're doing a podcast like this, right? You probably want a little bit more data
Mm-hmm.
when you're buying a car, or when you're talking to a salesperson, or when you're dealing with your wife and kids. You're not going to just take it at face value. You want some detail, I would
Mm-hmm.
assume, right?
Oh yeah.
so but by wanting that detail, I know that about you, therefore I
Mm-hmm.
understand now how better to have a conversation with you. Now, I'm an expressive driver. You then, for me, want to understand, like you're doing such a wonderful job of, that I like to tell stories. so so you're allowing me to do so. Yet when I now have to have a conversation with you, and let you into the conversation, I need to respect that you are probably going to ask me more questions about specific detail, and I need to be
Mm-hmm.
ready for that, and I need to respect that you need that in that relationship. So
Well, maybe we're doing a little bit of it right now, but it maybe I want to ask more specific questions. But on the flip side, if you're great at asking, or if you're great at telling stories, maybe I just need to open up the conversation and let it go where it go. Because when I first started doing podcasting, I would have like a list of like, all right, I'm gonna hit these 10 questions, so I can ask them this. We're gonna do a little back and forth, then I'm gonna ask them this. But I found that the best conversations are ones that are truly like a conversation. So maybe I planned on asking you, okay, there are 15 chapters in the book. Let's go through, let's do a brief overview of each one of them. But, maybe we talk about the first one and then we go over here and it turns out to be a great discussion. So I think that's a good thing to look at, is, people's different perspectives and personalities.
oh my golly, yes. I mean, you've learned well, Brandon. I mean, the fact of the matter is that by just posing questions, and doing what did our parents tell us? You have two ears and one mouth for a reason. So stop and listen a little bit, and allow that conversation to flow. As in my work as a chief happiness architect, when I go and I do cultural assessments of organizations or schools or what have you, when I'm having those conversations with people, it's amazing because of my Disney background, and people know, they just love to talk about Disney like you did earlier, and I can just ask a few questions. So the people who hire me are like, well, I want a detailed list, and I'll give it to them on the list of questions like you said. But what I tell them is, I'm probably not going to ask these the way you think I'm going to ask them. I'm not going to script them. I'm going to use them as conversation starters, and then let's sit back and let the people talk. And boy, the stories I get, just by because they want their voice to be heard. People want
Mhm.
their voice to be heard. So, but you have to allow them to do that, and just plain texting or having courage of the keyboard it isn't necessarily a great tool in building
Mhm.
relationships and starting conversations.
And I definitely think that's true because we do live in a world that's behind a screen. And oftentimes, if we post something on Facebook or Instagram, we try to hold up this persona that our life's great, or maybe I'm the travel person or I'm the gym person. But we're all people. We have families, we have emotions, we have good days, we have bad days. So, what I'm wondering is if someone wants to use this book or this framework, is this an individual's going to read this? Is a consultant going to help put this on? Is this a manager? Or is this kind of life lessons for every person?
The book. By the way, it's a short book. It's only 80 pages, and that was on purpose. I wanted people to not be scared of diving into it. And it really, I started writing it as more of a business type of book, but then it really evolved more into an individual personal communication kind of book. So it's good for the individual. It's definitely good for leaders and non-leaders and teams. It's good for your personal relationships at home. Also, I was just having a conversation with a colleague today who was struggling with a relationship at home, and we started talking about that. And the person ended up admitting that they just weren't uh, caring and allowing the other partner in their life to be who they are and listen to them and give them an opportunity to talk.
Hmm. So I think two people like me and you, I think we would get along even if we disagreed on something. I feel like we're two very agreeable people. I feel like I try to be very accommodating and validating to people. But what happens when that's not the case? What happens if there needs to be compromise? What happens if there is that conflict? Because there can be apathy in an organization where people aren't really involved, but for the most time, there are going to be things that need to get done, and there's going to be conflict there. So I think it's great we can talk about it in a good way. But how do we actually fix issues? How do we employ respecting and valuing everyone when there's issues that need to be dealt with?
Well, it's funny. The actual title of the book came from a course Disney used to do a long time ago, but it was this respect, appreciate, and value everyone. And some of my past Disney colleagues will ask me, why didn't she include appreciate? And I said, I said, I wanted to keep it simple, and I could respect you, Brandon, and I could value your position in life, or that you have family, or that what you're doing. Appreciate sometimes is a road too far. you know, I could tell you stories of people I don't appreciate, and the beauty of taking this approach is that you're going to find that out too. Sometimes you're just not going to click with somebody, and sometimes it's not going to be that you're going to be good friends. However, what this allows you to do, what this really kind of challenges you to do, is get to understand that individual, understand where they're coming from, and at the very least, maybe you could have a better working relationship, even though you're not going to be friends, or you might not even ever like each other. So, so the practical aspects of looking at rave and understanding their personality type, in trying to decide what are you trying to achieve with that individual, and I want to stop for a second there. When we're talking about what are you trying to achieve, it's not what's in it for me. It's like, are you trying to broach a difficult situation? Are you trying to build a friendship? Are you trying to have a transactional relationship, or focus on a transaction? And then if you go to the next step, you can say, okay, what solutions do we need to provide? Again, the solution here is that, I really want to leave this conversation being friends. Or the solution here is I want to sell this person an automobile, right? Now you know the solution, and then from all that information, now I know you. I have an idea of how you want to how you like to have a conversation, I have an idea of what we're trying to achieve. I have a solution. And then, most important, and this, when I talk to any company, any individual, the biggest issue everywhere is communication, lack of communication. And so the last step is that how do I ask that individual? So, like Brandon, what's the best way in your life now that you like to be communicated to? Text, email, phone, face to
Yeah,
face?
so work things I like email because it's kind of like my to-do list because I'll filter through. So if I get an email and I get a lot of announcements, we're having this event, I'll look at it, I'll delete it. But if it's something I need to do, I'll leave it in my email inbox. Personal life texting is a little bit better. I try to separate text and emails and stuff like that, but that's typically how I have it separated.
No, great. So if I find out, so first of all, just ask the question, just like I did to you, right? So okay, so email for a little bit more detailed stuff, text for a little bit more specific stuff,
Hmm.
and again, then knowing you're an analytic, I might want to be a little bit more careful at how I write my email to you, and I really want to make sure I'm detailing for you what the conversation's about or what the email is about, and also what the next action is.
Hmm.
Do you want me? I years ago, and I say in the book that I struggle with everything I talk about in this book every single day. Right? I struggle with that, and I say to them, that you just need to really dive in and have the courage just to have that conversation, ask that question. How do you want to be communicated to? And then if I'm now answering you in a way that you want to be answered, now I have a better opportunity of building respect and growing a stronger, more healthy relationship. Because even if I don't say to you, Brandon, am I respecting the way you like to do things? You're feeling it,
Hmm.
and if you're feeling it, then you're starting to feel these click points in your head that, hey, this guy might be okay. We can have a
Yeah,
better relationship.
and I think it's two things. I think part of it's, greasing the wheels a little bit because if you do something in a way that I do not like, naturally, even if we get along great, but if there's something that just rubs me the wrong way of the way that you communicate with me or something, it may just not harm the relationship, but it won't allow it to be as good as it could be. So one pet peeve that I have is if someone emails me and they say, "Hey, I want to talk to you," in my head, I'm like, okay, what do you want to talk to me about? Because I'm someone who likes to think about something. My wife will get mad at me all the time because if I'm in the car, before I start driving, I'll be like, I want to hurry and look this one thing up. And then I'll think about it while I'm driving or, so I like to, I don't know if rumination is the right word, but I like to think over stuff. So if someone emails me and they say, hey, I want to talk. I want to think about that because if I see them next, I want to be ready to talk with them. So, a little something like that, even if it was like, hey, let's talk. And then I call you and I say, hey, what are you doing for lunch? That just, I like to be set up for the type of conversation it's going to be.
What an awesome example. Yeah, I mean, I chose my title Chief Happiness Architect very intentionally because everybody wants to be happy,
Mhm.
but it also needs to be architected. So in your story, you just noted that so just that point of, hey, can we talk? That brings a lot of anxiety to somebody who is an amiable or somebody who is an analytic. A driver and expressive, there's no problem. Oh, cool. Yeah, no problem. Usually. Now remember, all these quadrants that we're talking about, you have pieces and parts of all of them. So,
Mhm.
my analytics really, really small, but I love analysis. Right, I really do. I really enjoy it, but boy, I got to work really hard to sit on my hands and shut up and and really dive into it because I want to make a solution. My driver in me wants to make a solution. So in your example, you said it so well. If I asked that to you, or if you felt comfortable with telling me, Chuck, you're driving me crazy. Can you just stop doing that and saying, just call me or let's
Mhm.
talk? Can you give me just a little bit more detail? I might just be like, oh, I never, sorry, Brandon, I didn't think that about you. And, I analogize it with like a rubber band, right? So a relationship's like a rubber band. So think about a relationship together and across the screens, Brandon, we're not pulling a rubber band together. Now, if I'm just going to dig in and be who I want to be, and you're going to dig in who you want to be, we're both pulling that rubber band. What's the tension on the rubber band?
Yeah, it's going to grow.
It's really tight. So that relationship tension's harsh, right? And if I continue to just drive it that way and it keeps getting more tense, that relationship can break, just like the rubber band, right? However, if we're now having a good relationship and we're having that conversation, just like you said, hey Chuck, you're driving me crazy by just saying call me or tell let's have give me a call or whatever, and I say, oh well, what I'm doing there is allowing the you to stretch the relationship to you, and then you're saying, and then when I talk, you're going to allow me to stretch the relationship to me a little bit. So you're allowing it to flex, and
Mhm.
that's a good relationship is not subservient. It's not one sided. It's give and take. So I like to I put that example in the book, and I love that example from an old friend of mine.
I like what you said at the end there. Relationship isn't give and take, and there's a textbook that we use in one of my leadership classes, and it has a chapter on followership because naturally, if there's going to be a leader, there's going to be a follower. But they make the point that a leader and a follower aren't necessarily on different levels. Like, of course, there's going to be a power difference. Someone's going to have kind of this institutional prerogative to make decisions and stuff, but people there doesn't have to be a wide disparity between where these people are. You can talk to two people like people, even if someone's your boss. Obviously, you need to give them your respect. Different cultures are going to have different power distances, where maybe in the United States, it's okay to push back and talk back a little bit more, but other cultures that isn't okay. But still, I think it's okay to have two conversations as adults, not, parent child, just, they're on the same level. So I think that last
Well,
point that you said is very, very good.
no, so true. And even as you overlap the cultural aspect. So now when we have a discussion about first uh we talk about what our personalities are, we understand what our personalities are. Now let's what's that cultural overlap? And, I told you about that client who the people were, at each other's throats. And there was huge cultural overlap there, but I wasn't going to dive in to cultural issues because that's personal. However, what I did was use exercises, what I call virtually breaking bread, because, everybody says if you go have a dinner with somebody and, you ask questions like, what, do you have any ethnic background? What sort of food did you grow up eating? Like you, what sort of food did you grow up eating, Brandon? Do you have like a,
Yeah, so I grew up in the West. I'm from Utah, and something that we didn't eat was seafood. You're in the middle of a desert. You're not going to be eating a lot of seafood.
yeah.
So normal stuff, I guess. But coming out here to the South, oh, you got to try this seafood and this seafood, and that's something that I'll try. I like tame stuff. I like salmon and halibut and crab and stuff. But any of the more intense stuff, it's just not for me.
Yeah, and see, I came out of an Italian family, so we love the pastas and the pizzas and all that. Now, just having that conversation, I know that I just learned from you that you came from Utah, right? That you're from the desert, so you were more of a land guy, and you weren't a seafood guy, and now you came south to see. Look how the items I learned about you just by virtually breaking bread. And the other thing that can overlap is culturally, right? So I could say to somebody, hey, what is your did you grow up in this country? Did your parents grow up in this country? And I heard so many people, oh no, I grew up in India, or I grew up in Europe, or I grew up in South Africa, and it's what tell me about the foods from there. Did you have like a favorite thing that you still make from your ethnic culture? Oh yeah, we do this and that. I mean, it's amazing how that brings people together. That group that was at odds that I was telling you about, that when I first designed this, they walked out literally with their arms around each other, smiling and laughing. I'm not saying that always happens that way, but it just was so emotionally inspiring to me. It was one of the greatest moments of my professional career to watch this group that had huge demographic differences, huge cultural differences. I mean, huge cultural differences. And then literally just by having a conversation like we are right now, realized that they weren't. You said it earlier, Brandon. They weren't that far apart because the media today will let you think that everybody is either here or here, right? And
Yeah.
really, most people are here and here. And then if you think about the all the different topics that are out there, they switch all over the place, right? I mean, they want you to make you think that we are so diametrically separated, and we're not. We're really closer than you think. So when you start having these courageous conversations to start a relationship with somebody, it's amazing that it's not that much of a leap to actually start building a friendship, or at the very least a good relationship.
I've never thought about food like that, breaking bread, but I think food, naturally is going to lower people's barriers because people have their favorite foods. They have foods they don't like. Everyone has to eat. So, that can be something that I've heard a lot of people miss food, especially if they're from other countries. I had a class with this one student, and I can't remember what country he's from, but he said there's this one tea I would get at this one restaurant in the village I was from, and I crave it every day, and it's not the way that they make it, it's not the way that it is at home. So if someone were to dig into that a little bit more, share that with that person, I think that can break down a lot of walls. But I think what we talk about when we talk about team building, I think the best case scenarios where you have a team that's like this, your clashing team, and then they come together, breaking bread, everyone's arms around each other. But what do you do when you try your hardest to just settle things down, to at least make things tolerable with this person, to at least just get things done, but things are still just super abrasive? Because it would be great if you came to work, you had friends, you didn't just you had friends you felt happy about going to lunch with. But what happens when you're just really struggling with just even getting the job done, let alone the relationship side, just actually getting the job done?
Yeah, I had instances in my career. One that really, I mean, I lost sleep over like for a long, long period of time because, I'm a gregarious guy, and this person just did not like me. I mean, I know that's hard to uh, fathom, but they just didn't like me at all, and it didn't matter what I did, like you said, Brandon. And so you have to be able to go to bed at night, right? So sometimes, as long as you have given the opportunity for that individual to get to know you, right? Then then that's all you could do, and then you just need to move on. You don't want to put any emotional capital back into that so much. Now, that being said, we still had to work together, and so it really became on me once I released that emotional capital. I became a lot more astute at making sure that I was able to build solutions or workarounds or things that were necessary. It's a shame that you had to, but it's a reality, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're talking. In some case, it's a reality. Now, I still continue to try. I still we went to lunch. We talked, and in that part it was kind of great. I mean, the person said, "I just don't like you." I said, "Oh, okay." It was just literally one of those times that you have those personality rubs. However, I did notice, because I tried, that person at least allowed me my space and took a wide berth. When I was around, and I had to learn to live with that, even though it hurt. And as a human being, that hurts
Mm-hmm.
because you want to have that relationship, but sometimes you can't. But what you could do for yourself is learn how to at least put it in a parking lot, and you could definitely get great solace from the fact that you truly, and you have to challenge yourself, by the way, because sometimes we could be jerks ourselves, right? So you gotta be truly introspective and saying, okay, where am I being that jerk? Am I, and you can get guidance from other colleagues about it, but sometimes you just got to move on.
And I think, having a conversation like that where, you could say, hey, why don't you like me? Or I hate you. That the person who came right out and said it. Maybe having a difficult, uncomfortable conversation like that will, 30 minutes of difficult conversation is going to save you from, losing sleep at night. And why don't they like me? I feel like I'm doing things for them that, releases that tension where, it's like, well, got to move on. But until that uncomfortable conversation happens, maybe neither party was allowed to do so.
Exactly right. And why spend? And by the way, it also could be that you realize that the work environment you're in isn't a healthy one.
Mm-hmm.
So, and sometimes we have to take the chance to. I thought that when I left Disney and took retirement, I was like, golly, I was thinking about doing that the rest of my life, and retiring there, and this things were happening within corporate America that I couldn't, um, I could not uh, teach something or sell something that really wasn't happening the way that they said it was anymore. And so
Mm-hmm.
I had to make that opportunity. I had to take that leap. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. Being able to write a book and still travel the country helping organizations with their happiness. I mean, dude, I have a pretty cool gig. So,
Definitely, that's something, chief happiness architect. I First off, I don't think people know that exists, but two, if they did know, I'm sure that would be on everyone's list. So I'm glad are able to get to um, that point. But a question that I usually save this for the end, and I know we're getting there, but we still have some time. One question I
okay.
ask everyone is, what advice do you have for someone who's just starting out? Obviously, you just said you took a semi early retirement from Disney. You've had a degree of professional success with Disney and your own company and consulting and everything else. So you've had a successful career. But what advice do you have for someone who's trying to respect and value everyone because they're in the thick of it?
Well, first of all, have the courage to get to know one another, like we've talked about a little bit. I also go back to my first chapter, which is the golden rule. It is that simple. We overthink things. If you're in situations, stop. And the golden rule is treat others the way you want to be treated. It's that basic. I say in the book, just to be funny, that I could have stopped the book right there and then just saw all blank pages on the rest of it. But I think people would get upset that they paid for the book. Then I had
Yeah.
to give them a little bit more. But that would be the top advice. It's such a ancient and simple task or action that you're being given. But if you really think about Brandon, think about any situation in your life. If you stopped for a moment or where you had conflict and you said, okay, I'm being treated poorly. What's going on with this person? So how do I treat them the way I want to be treated? Could you have, sometimes yes, sometimes no, could you have brought down that tension and allowed for a better resolution in that moment? And I'd say a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the times you probably could, so so that would be the one bit of advice, as simple as it is.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. So, if you had to give someone the biggest selling point for this book, what would it be? I know you've talked about the golden rule, but what's the biggest selling point? Why should someone pick up this book? Why should someone work with you at improving themselves and their organizational culture?
Brandon, I loved earlier that you said leaders and followers, right? Because you look through the internet or you're on LinkedIn or any business sites, everything's about be this leader and be a leader. And the poor people who don't want to be a leader are like, well, what about me? I don't want to be a leader. It's probably one of the biggest errors that we have in actual business life, that we say, you're doing so well, I'm going to make you a leader, and the person thinks they have to take it, and they really don't want to be. So it's really about the book. If you have any idea of that you want to build effective relationships, and you want it, by the way, to be simple, and you want to be able, I mean, if you want to read this within 2 hours, you can. you know, and you want to laugh a little bit and hear some funny stories at the same time, but you want it to be practical. You want it to be something that you could take home and use, take to the office and use, teach other people to use. I mean, that is the book in a nutshell, or in a binding, as that might be. So, yeah, it really is just an incredible. It's been so cathartic for me. And I told you, when that first group left, and they just had their arms around each other and smiles, and by the way, their KPIs, the metrics that they use to measure employee engagement, customer service, all went through the roof. I mean, double digit increases. So imagine you multiply that, not just in your business life, in your personal life. Um, that's the reason to read the book, and also it's not going to hurt your brain too much. I kept it simple so everybody can follow it, and it's very practical.
Well, I think that's good. I think there's a time and a place for in-depth academic books, but there's also a time
One,
and a place for books that, you can read on a weekend just real quick. So, Chuck, if people want to work with you, if people want to reach out to you, where do they find you?
well, you could just Google me at Chuck Salvo. I have Salvo Innovative Solutions. You can Google that online. You can link into me on LinkedIn through my LinkedIn site. I do a lot of articles on there. I just mentioned that I dropped one today, but there's a lot of insights and articles on top of that. And you could get there either on LinkedIn, go to my website at salvoinnovativesolutions.com, or read my book, and you can find a way to contact me that way also. I'd love to hear those people who listen to this, their comments and thoughts and their stories. So if you see me on LinkedIn, or if you just want to send me an email, share me your stories too about good relationships, bad relationships, or just ways that make your life happier.
Thank you, Chuck. So everyone go pick up Rave, How to Respect and Value Everyone, A Journey of Life Lessons from Disney and Beyond by Chuck Salvo. Thanks so much for coming on today, Chuck.
Thank you, Brandon. It's been wonderful.
And thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. But you have a great day and happy learning. We'll see you next time.